The idea of the first rodeo often brings up pictures of dusty towns, tough cowboys, and wide open spaces. People wonder where it all began. Was it in a small Colorado town? This is a question many folks ask. It's a story told in different ways, in different places. People sometimes say a small town in Colorado hosted the first rodeo. It sounds right, doesn't it? Colorado has a rich history with cowboys, cattle, and the Old West. It feels like a natural fit. You can imagine it easily. Cowboys fresh off a long cattle drive showing off their skills. A crowd gathering. This image is strong. But what does first rodeo really mean? This is where it gets a bit tricky. Is it the very first time cowboys competed against each other? Or is it the first time such a contest was put on for people to watch? Or is it the first time tickets were sold? Each of these ideas can lead to a different answer. This difference in understanding is key to figuring out the truth. The American West was huge. Many towns and ranches had cowboys. These cowboys had skills they used every day. Roping a calf, riding a bucking horse, branding cattle. These weren't just tricks. They were part of the job. And like any group of skilled people, cowboys liked to see who was best. They'd challenge each other. These challenges were the seeds of what we now call rodeo. So, when we talk about the first one, we have to be clear. Are we looking for the earliest informal contest? Or a more structured event? The story of the first rodeo is not as simple as pointing to one place and one date. It's a story with many threads. It's a story that involves different towns, different years, and different ideas of what a rodeo actually was. Some people believe a town called Deer Trail, Colorado holds the claim. They point to an event there in 1869. This event was indeed a competition for cowboys. It was a chance for them to show what they could do. It was a big deal for that time and place. But was it the very first? And did it look like the rodeos we know today? Probably not exactly. The question of origin is important because it connects to pride. The towns want to be known for something special. Being the birthplace of the rodeo would be a big claim to fame. It would link that town directly to a huge part of American culture. So when Colorado towns make their claims, they do it with a lot of local passion. But we have to look beyond just local claims. We need to look at what happened in other parts of the West. Texas, Wyoming, Arizona. These places also have strong cowboy traditions. They also have their own stories about early cowboy contests. It's a bit like trying to find the very first time someone told a joke. You can find early examples, but saying one was the very first is hard. This piece will look at these different claims. We will think about what rodeo means. We will see how these events changed over time. It's a look at history, not just a search for a single date. We will explore the idea that the first rodeo is more complicated than it seems. And we will see if that small Colorado town truly holds the title, or if the story is a bit richer and wider than one single place. The roots of rodeo go deep into the everyday life of the cowboy. They lived a hard life. They worked with powerful animals. Their skills were essential for their job. They had to be good with a rope. They had to be good on a horse, and they had to be tough. So, when they finished a tough job, like a cattle roundup, it was natural for them to want to test their skills against each other. It was a way to let off steam. It was a way to prove who was the best. This kind of competition happened on countless ranches and at countless chuck wagon camps across the West. It wasn't planned, it wasn't advertised, it just happened. This is one layer of the first rodeo question. These early informal contests were simple. Maybe two cowboys would bet $1 on who could rope a steer faster, or who could stay on a wild horse longer. There were no grandstands, no ticket booths. Just cowboys and their animals, and maybe a few ranch hands watching. This kind of showing off and friendly rivalry was probably happening almost as soon as there were cowboys and cattle. It was part of the culture. But when people talk about the first rodeo, they usually mean something more. They often mean an event that was organized, an event that had some structure, maybe a prize, maybe an audience. This is where the definition starts to change. This is where we move from casual bragging rights to something that looks more like a public spectacle. Let's think about the skills. Bronc riding, bull riding, calf roping, steer wrestling. These are all things the cowboys did or adapted from their daily work. Taming a wild horse was a daily task. Roping a calf for branding was routine. So, turning these tasks into contests was a small step. It made sense to them. The term rodeo itself comes from the Spanish word rodear. This means to surround or to round up. It was used to describe the annual roundup of cattle. During these roundups, cowboys from different ranches would work together, and after the work was done, they would often have these informal contests. So, the word connects directly to the working cowboy life. The transition from these work-related contests to actual public events was slow. It didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen in just one place. It was a gradual evolution. As towns grew and as the West became more settled, people looked for entertainment. They wanted to see the exciting skills of the cowboys. And the cowboys, always looking for a challenge and maybe a bit of prize money, were happy to oblige. So, when we try to pinpoint the first rodeo, we are really looking for the moment when these informal ranch activities became something more. Something with rules, something with an audience, something with prizes. And as we will see, different places have strong arguments for being that something more first. It wasn't just a Colorado thing, it was a Western thing. And many towns played a part in shaping what rodeo is today. The origins are truly spread out across the landscape of the Old West, reflecting the shared cowboy culture that defined the era. If the first rodeo wasn't in Colorado, then where could it have been? Many other places claim to hold that title. The story of rodeo's beginning is truly a competition of historical claims, much like the rodeo events themselves. Each town has its own version, its own evidence, and its own definition of first. One of the strongest claims comes from Pecos, Texas. The folks in Pecos say they held the first public rodeo on July 4th, 1883. This was an organized event. Cowboys competed for cash prizes. It had specific events like bronc riding and steer roping. This makes the Pecos event a very strong contender for the first organized public rodeo. It was not just an informal gathering, it was planned, it was for people to watch. And it involved money. This changes things. Then there is Prescott, Arizona. Prescott makes a very specific claim. They say they held the first paid admission rodeo on July 4th, 1888. This means people paid money to get in and watch. This is a big step towards what we think of as a modern rodeo. If people are paying, it means the event is a show, a business, not just a free contest among friends. The Prescott event was advertised, it had set rules, and it had prizes. This is a very important part of the story. It marks a shift from informal fun to organized entertainment. Wyoming also has a big place in rodeo history. The Cheyenne Frontier Days in Cheyenne, Wyoming, started in 1897. It is one of the biggest and oldest rodeos still going strong. While it started later than Pecos or Prescott, it built on those early ideas. It grew into a massive annual event, showing how popular rodeo could become. Its roots were in celebrating the West and its cowboy culture. These different claims highlight the problem of finding the first. If we mean the first time cowboys competed, it was likely informal and happened everywhere. If we mean the first organized contest, Pecos has a good claim. If we mean the first with paid admission, Prescott steps forward. Each claim depends on how you define rodeo. Other towns across the West likely had similar early events. Many local fairs and festivals in the late 1800s would feature cowboy contests. These were not always called rodeos. Sometimes they were cowboy tournaments or range competitions, but they were all part of the same evolving tradition. They all showed cowboys doing what they did best. The important thing is that these events were not isolated. They were part of a widespread movement. As the frontier closed and as the romance of the cowboy became popular, people wanted to see these skills firsthand. They wanted to see the excitement. So, these contests grew from ranch work to public spectacles. The change from an informal competition to a structured show was a big one. It meant setting rules. It meant having judges. It meant having a program of events. And it meant attracting an audience. This evolution happened in many places at roughly the same time. There was no central committee deciding how rodeo should start. It grew organically from the culture of the American West. So, while a small Colorado town might have had a very early cowboy contest, it was part of a larger trend. And other towns like Pecos and Prescott can make strong cases for specific firsts, depending on how we define rodeo. The history is rich and varied, with many communities contributing to the birth of this unique American sport. It wasn't a single event, it was a movement. Now, let's turn to the specific claims made by Colorado. The state is definitely a part of Western history, and it has its own strong contenders for the title of First Rodeo. The most talked about claim for Colorado points to a town called Deer Trail. People in Deer Trail, Colorado, believe their town hosted the first rodeo. They say it happened on July 4th, 1869. This was a cowboy tournament. It was part of a 4th of July celebration. The story goes that cowboys gathered from all around. They came to compete. They wanted to show off their skills. This event had different contests. There was bronc riding. There was steer roping. and there was a prize for the winner. The prize was a suit of clothes. That's a pretty unique prize. The Deer Trail claim is old. It's well known in Colorado. But what kind of event was it exactly? Was it like the rodeos we see today, or even like the ones in Pecos or Prescott years later? This is where the details matter. The Deer Trail event was certainly a gathering of cowboys for competition. It featured skills that would become core rodeo events. It had a prize. This makes it very significant as an early example of organized cowboy competition. But let's compare it to the claims from Pecos and Prescott. Pecos in 1883 had an organized public rodeo with cash prizes. Prescott in 1888 had the first paid admission event. The Deer Trail event in 1869 was earlier. But was it as formally organized as Pecos? Was it advertised to the public in the same way? Was there an admission fee? Historical records for such early events can be sparse. It's hard to know all the details. Some historians argue that while the Deer Trail event was a clear cowboy tournament, it might not fit the definition of a rodeo in the sense of a public commercial spectacle. It was probably more of a local gathering, a chance for cowboys to compete among themselves, with locals watching. The term rodeo itself wasn't commonly used for these kinds of events until later. The difference often comes down to definition. If first rodeo means the earliest recorded cowboy contest with some structure and prizes, then Deer Trail has a very strong argument for 1869. This event certainly predates Pecos and Prescott. It was a formal competition in its time. However, if first rodeo means the first event marketed to a broad public with paid admission, then Prescott's 1888 claim stands out. And if it means the first officially organized and widely recognized public competition, then Pecos's 1883 claim is strong. The local pride in these claims is huge. For Deer Trail, the 1869 tournament is a cornerstone of their town's identity. They have a monument there. They celebrate this history. And this is important. It shows how deeply rooted the cowboy tradition is in places like Colorado. It's also worth noting that many early Western towns had similar events. It wasn't just Deer Trail, but the Deer Trail story has been carefully preserved and promoted. It has become a key part of the conversation about rodeo origins. So, while a small Colorado town did indeed host a very early and important cowboy competition, whether it was the first rodeo depends on the exact definition you use. It was undoubtedly a significant stepping stone in the evolution of rodeo, but the full picture is broader. It includes other places, other events, and slightly different ideas of what a rodeo was at the very start. The Colorado claim is strong for an early organized contest, but the larger story of rodeo's birth is shared across the American West. So, was the first rodeo held in a small Colorado town? The simple answer is, it depends on what you mean by rodeo. It's not a straightforward yes or no. The history is richer and more complex than that. If you mean the very first time cowboys informally competed against each other after a cattle roundup, showing off their skills for bragging rights, then no single place can claim that title. That kind of competition happened everywhere there were cowboys in the American West. It was a natural part of their tough lives. It was common. It wasn't something officially recorded in one spot. If you define rodeo as an organized cowboy tournament with specific events and prizes, then the Deer Trail, Colorado event in 1869 is a very strong contender. It certainly was an early example of cowboys gathering to formally compete. It happened before many of the other widely cited firsts. This makes Colorado's claim significant in the history of cowboy competitions. It marks a moment when those informal contests started to become more structured. But if you define rodeo as the first organized public event that charged admission, where people paid to watch the cowboys, then places like Prescott, Arizona, with its 1888 event, have a very compelling argument. That shift to a paid spectacle is a big step towards modern rodeo. It changed the nature of the event from a local contest to a public show. And if you look for the first event that was widely publicized and very organized, even without paid admission at first, then Pecos, Texas in 1883 also has a strong claim. Their event was clearly structured and for a public audience. What this all means is that the idea of the first rodeo isn't a single event at a single location. It was more of an evolution. It started with informal challenges, it slowly became more organized, then it became a public spectacle, and finally it became a commercial entertainment. This evolution happened in different places, at different times, often overlapping. Colorado definitely played an important part in this history. The event in Deer Trail in 1869 was a pioneering effort. It showed that cowboy skills could be turned into an exciting competition. It helped lay the groundwork for what rodeo would become. So, while it might not be the first by every definition, it was certainly an incredibly early and important one. The spirit of rodeo competition, skill, and celebrating Western heritage was something shared across the entire cowboy culture. It wasn't confined to one state or one town. The desire to show off expert horsemanship and roping abilities was universal among cowboys. And the public's fascination with these skills grew as the West became more settled. Today, rodeo is a huge sport and a major cultural event. It carries on traditions that began over a century ago. And these traditions grew from many different seeds planted in many different places across the American West. So, while a small Colorado town holds a strong and proud place in this history, the story of rodeo's birth is a shared story, a blend of many firsts, depending on how you choose to look at it. It's a testament to the enduring appeal of the cowboy and the skills that defined an era.